Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another episode of my director's collections, where I just go through some of my favourite directors and just show you what I have of their work on physical media. Today it's a biggie. Michael Powell is probably more famous as creating arguably the greatest partnership in cinema history. As far as writer, director, producers, I'm not even sure who would even argue that, with Emmerich Pressburger, the English gentleman who loved the Scottish Highlands mixed with an immigrant Hungarian via Germany and France, who had a unique perspective on Englishness or Britishness, created some of the greatest works of art of all time. But Michael Powell was then forgotten about. He was always ahead of his time, like people like Orson Welles and David Cronenberg, for example. But Michael Powell and Pressburger were ahead of their time. I mean, they were doing Technicolor extravaganzas when everybody else was picking themselves after the Second World War, and doing kitchen sink dramas. But that's amazing. In my opinion, the greatest director Britain ever produced, basically forgotten about. And you could make the argument that Martin Scorsese's greatest achievement in his life is actually befriending Michael Powell and helping in the restoration of some of Powell and Pressburger's greatest films, and actually making people aware of Michael Powell and his work. So again, I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'm just going to go through what I have in physical media, and let's start with some DVD discs only that I have. The Phantom Light, which is one of his early films, 1935 I believe. This is before Pressburger. And then one of the Archer's kind of less well known films, Contraband. This has Conrad Veidt in it as well. This needs I think certainly in Britain, not so great anymore, but certainly in Britain it should be law that every Michael Powell film should at least have a Blu-ray, but unfortunately quite a lot of them don't, including again another gem that through some eyes could be a masterpiece, A Canterbury Tale, famous of course for the cut between a Hawk turns into a Spitfire. Kubrick in 2001, years later, would obviously do the bone into a spacecraft, but Michael Powell did it in A Canterbury Tale. Bizarrely, a Michael Powell film that I actually saw in the cinema when it was restored. Again, this is another one that Scorsese helped getting the restoration done. The Wonderful Tales of Hoffman. Yes, it's flawed, but I would rather have the flawed Tales of Hoffman than a million other films combined. Peeping Tom on 4K. Also, this is available in Criterion as well in 4K. The film that pretty much killed his film career in Britain. He went to Australia to make films. This is about the dangers of looking, the dangers of cinema itself. Michael Powell has a sneaky cameo in this, because in his younger days he was an actor, and he appears in a couple of his own films. And then this is a BFI discovery that's absolutely wonderful. This is Bluebeard's Castle. It's a relatively, I think it was released last year. This was kind of made in between 1963 and 1978. It's only 63 minutes. It's for German television, I believe. But again, you know, Michael Powell did like collaborators, but he was one of those directors, if he didn't have any use for you, he wasn't interested. But he was open to collaboration. Obviously the cinematographers that he worked with created some of the greatest looking films of all time, and the production design, Hein Eckroth, who did The Red Shoes and many others, Tales of Hoffman. So this is a little oddity, but it's also covered in Michael Powellness. This is without Pressburger. And again, it's a filming of an opera. It says in the cover, or there's a quote by Bertrand Tavernier, who said it's the missing link that connects the Tales of Hoffman and Peeping Tom. It's well worth a look. Now this is arguably one of my favourite Powell and Pressburgers, even though it would be pretty much low on the list for everybody else. It's The Spy in Black with Conrad Veidt. He plays a German and who wants to scuttle the British fleet, and he's on a mission in the north of Scotland. And again, because of Pressburger's writing, this is one of their first collaborations, so they weren't quite the Archers, even though they were together at this point. You actually want Conrad Veidt to win, or maybe that's just me because I love Conrad Veidt. Yeah, it's just a wonderful film. Valerie Hobson gives great support as his contact. It's just an absolute gem. Needs a Blu-ray. BFI should get onto it. One of their most underrated films, which again was in the middle of, or was kind of between Black Narcissus and Red Shoes, or the Red Shoes and Black Narcissus, and it was black and white, so it kind of got lost in the mix. But it's David Farrar in The Small Back Room, with Kathleen Byron, who of course was in Black Narcissus, and Jack Hawkins, about a bomb disposal officer with psychological and alcoholic problems. It's just an absolute gem, and was so happy when Vintage Classics announced this Blu-ray release, because it's just in DVD in the Criterion. And there's new special features restoring The Small Back Room, a tortured hero, Kevin MacDonald, in The Small Back Room, who of course is related to Emmerich Pressburger. Diffusing the Archers, Ian Christie, in The Small Back Room. There's an audio commentary with film scholar Charles Barr, an interview with cinematographer Christopher Chalice, and the making of an Englishman. So I'd highly recommend The Small Back Room if you haven't seen it. There's a wonderful DT sequence. Then one from Indicator. This is when he went to Australia. This is Age of Consent, with James Mason. James Mason and young women. It seems to be a theme. This is Helen Mirren in one of her youngest roles. Jack McGowan's in it as well. Not particularly successful, but it is a fascinating little film. The special features, as usual, by Indicator are extensive. There's 2 cuts of the film. This is from 1969, so it's 107 minutes and a 100-minute cut. The 2005 restoration director's cut is the 107-minute version. There's an audio commentary by Kent Jones from 2009. There is a John Player lecture with Michael Powell from 1971 for 85 minutes, which is fantastic. And then there's a 1985 105-minute interview with Powell and Pressburger by Ian Christie, who of course wrote Arrows of Desire. Age of Innocence is a 38-minute in-depth look at the film by Ian Christie. And there's a 2009 17-minute making of. There's a 6-minute piece where Martin Scorsese talks about the film from 2009. There's a 13-minute conversation with Helen Mirren from 2009. There's a conversation with Ron and Valerie Taylor, who did the underwater scenes, who also did the underwater shots for Jaws. And it does have The Boy Who Turned Yellow from 1972, which was Powell and Pressburger's final collaboration for the Children's Film Foundation, which is 54 minutes. So even if you're not a huge fan of the film itself, it is absolutely loaded. I think the limited edition's out of print, but the standard edition's still available. So if you are a fan, there's so much stuff in the disc. And then a film you might have heard of, The Red Shoes. This is on DVD from Criterion. And then I also had the 4K from Criterion. This is the 4K and the Blu-ray from 1948. Yeah, I'm not into ballet, but the film's not really about ballet. It's about what are you prepared to sacrifice for your art. One of the greatest films of all time, made in 1948. And then this might be my favourite Powell and Pressburger film. This is Black Narcissus. This is a Region A Criterion Blu-ray from 1947. So when you consider they did Black Narcissus, Red Shoes, well, Small Back Room, so you can kind of see why or how the Small Back Room kind of got forgotten about after these two ridiculous pieces of art. Needless to say, Black Narcissus is my favourite nun film. And then one of the great mysteries of our time, How I Know Where I'm Going, is only on DVD. This is Criterion. BFI or Criterion or somebody needs to get their finger out and give this a Blu-ray. Again, one of my favourites, about a driven woman going to the north of Scotland for a wedding to marry a local laird. Meets Roger Livesey and meets nature itself. It's just absolutely beautiful, absolutely wonderful, and it really needs a Blu-ray. This is the Criterion DVD The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp from 1943. Yeah, just another masterpiece. Let's make a film criticising the way the British Army works during World War II. Churchill didn't like it, but he was probably off his face in cocaine at the time. One of the greatest monologues by Anton Walbrook, Deborah Kerr, in a low-key kind of only playing 3 characters in the film. Just an absolute masterpiece, but again this had to be restored, and it was butchered, but it finally got restored to its proper length. Here's the Criterion DVD of Tales of Hoffmann. There is a Criterion Blu-ray with pretty much the same extras. Again, Tales of Hoffmann should have a 4K. And here's the Criterion DVD of The Small Back Room. Again, it might be a Archer's film you haven't heard of, but I would highly recommend it. And then another straight up masterpiece, even though I'm not the biggest fan of it, even though it's still a masterpiece. That's how good Michael Powell and Pressburger were. A Matter of Life and Death or Stairway to Heaven from 1946. So again, they did this in 1946, Black Narcissus in 1947, The Red Shoes in 1948. So those 3 years, they pretty much created 3 of the greatest films of all time. Ridiculous. I mean, there is an argument to be made that Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger weren't actually human. The Edge of the World. This is a beautiful little film from 1937 that Powell made. It's only 75 minutes, but again, nature, north of Scotland, thrilling, beautiful, just absolutely ravishing on the Blu-ray. And there's a nice 58-minute piece where they go back years later. It's just a wonderful little film that I would highly recommend. One of our aircraft is missing. This is a lovely BFI edition on Blu-ray. Please do the same for I Know Where I'm Going and The Canterbury Tale, and The Spy in Black. Sorry. So this follows some British airmen shot down in the Netherlands. Eric Portman. It's just absolutely wonderful. I'd highly recommend it. I know I'm going to say that all the time. And then this was a lovely release last year from BFI, one of my favourite releases from last year. It's some early works by Michael Powell. So this is from 1931 to 1944. So you get Rhinox, Hotel Splendide, The Night of the Party, Her Last Affair and Behind the Mask. Now, none of these are masterpieces, but again, if you're a fan of Michael Powell, they have elements that would be shown in his later work. Again, tons of special features, and the films look really good. There's multiple commentaries. We do get the Riviera Revels, the Travel Laugh number 1 and number 10 from 1927, where Michael Powell actually plays a tourist falling over and stuff like that. There's a 42-minute documentary about his early work. There's a 41-minute piece from 2023 about the unmade films of Michael Powell, which is actually quite moving. There's an interview with Erwin Hillier from 1988, who again shot, I think he shot I Know Where I'm Going, but I could be wrong on that. The Archers in Argentina, a 21-minute piece from 1954, with Michael Powell and lots of stars, footage shot by Pressburger. Again, if you are into Michael Powell, this is an absolute must-buy. It's 286 minutes in total for the films. Again, none of them are amazing films, but the seeds are there. 49 Parallel. Yes, this is the one with Larry Olivier hamming it up as a Canadian, a French Canadian. But he does have that wonderful moment where he questions the Germans, saying, you know, you walk about, you know, goose stepping and all of that. And they say yes, and Larry Olivier goes, why? Which is wonderful. This is the reverse of One of Our Aircraft is Missing. This is about a German U-boat crew who are on the run in Canada. And again, this was kind of a propaganda film, but even Powell and Pressburger's propaganda films were much better than, well, everybody else's. Yeah, this is wonderful, and again, this has an appearance by Anton Walbrook, who gives a wonderful monologue as a group of Germans in Canada who are just farmers, who aren't, you know, Nazis. So again, it was just that intelligence of Pressburger to say, well, not all Germans are actually Nazis, which again, during the war, that was kind of, surely not. Leslie Howard and Raymond Massey are in it as well. Again, it's one of those, it's not a masterpiece, but it's just so good and so enjoyable. Then we have the Blu-ray of The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. Again, this should have a 4K because it's just absolutely gorgeous. And again, there's a Martin Scorsese restoration piece, because again, without Scorsese we probably wouldn't have the proper cut, and that's where Scorsese's real value comes in. Sorry for people who are fans of The Departed and The Irishman. Black Narcissus, this is on Network Blu-ray. This has a commentary by Powell and Scorsese. O Rosalinda, which kind of, you can put with the Red Shoes, Tales of Hoffmann, and then O Rosalinda. This is their version of Deflatormouse from 1955. This is them, past their best perhaps, but it still has wonderful moments. Anton Walbrook's in this as well, Dennis Price, Anthony Quayle, Ludmilla Cherina, who was in Tales of Hoffmann, Mel Ferrer, Michael Redgrave, shot by Christopher Chalice. It's just a lot of fun. The production design's Hein Heckroth. It's flawed, but it's a light confection. And then we have Honeymoon, which is Powell by himself. It's more a kind of travelogue of Spain, really. It's not great. It does have Ludmilla Cherina again. It has Leonore de Messin, who was in Tales of Hoffmann and The Red Shoes. It's still enjoyable enough, but it's obviously not on a par with their finest work. And then we have The Wild Heart, but don't really watch The Wild Heart. The reason I've got this is because it's gone to Earth on Blu-ray again. A kind of underseen and underrated 1950 Powell and Pressburger with Jennifer Jones and David Farrar. It's okay, David Farrar doesn't show off his knees in this one, but this was butchered by Selznick, who was going out with Jennifer Jones at the time. It was butchered and released as The Wild Heart, but fortunately this Kino Lorber has gone to Earth in its proper version. Again, it is flawed. Obviously Jennifer Jones' casting isn't the best casting in the world, but David Farrar's brilliant. Cyril Cusack's fantastic as well. So again, if you haven't seen this one, it's highly recommended, even though it's not like the best of the best of the best of the best of the best. So thanks very much for watching. Please let me know which Michael Powell or Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger films you have in physical media, and what's your favourite. But again, we'll never see Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger, the likes of that, ever again. Again, as I said, you could argue they were aliens, the stuff that they did. But as usual with great artists, there are periods where everybody forgets about them and ignores them, and they don't understand what they're doing. But it's good to see that now Michael Powell is regarded, as he should be, as one of the all-time greats. And for me, he is the greatest British filmmaker of all time. Forget Hitchcock or David Lean. Michael Powell just blows them out of the water as far as I'm concerned. So thanks very much for watching this episode of my Director Collections. Thank you very much for thanks so much for watching. That was supposed to be, and hopefully join me again for more episodes of Director Collections. This is Solitary Ronan from Solitary Ronan Films, saying farewell.